Susan Yaki with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, Iraq's prime minister invites U.S. businesses to his nation. A poll reports a majority of Americans support the U.S. troop withdrawal from Iraq.
We did as much as we can to help them out, and they're taking the lead on everything. So honestly, it's time for us to go home and let them take care of their own.
Yemen continues a transition towards democracy. And Egypt's Islamists raise alarms over Western freedoms. It's all ahead on The Voice of America. Iraq's prime minister says it's time for U.S. businesses to take a prominent role in his country. VOA's Carla Babb reports.
The U.S. ends its military presence in Iraq this month. But Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki told business leaders at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Tuesday that the economic relationship between the U.S. and Iraq is far from over.
The mutual sacrifices and hard work in between the two countries and by the two countries in fighting terrorism, this will be the bridge that will make it possible to more American corporations in order to come to Iraq and do its constructive work.
About 40 Iraqi business leaders accompanied Mr. Maliki to Washington this week, eager to build strong partnerships with U.S. companies. Deputy U.S. Secretary of State Thomas Nides welcomed them.
This is a time for America to start thinking of Iraq as a country, not as a war. One defined not just by who is leaving, but who is staying.
Iraq's security situation leaves some companies hesitant to do business there. Deadly attacks are frequent, but violence is down significantly since peaking in 2006 and 2007. U.S. Secretary of Commerce John Bison told the chamber Iraq is worth the risk.
More U.S. companies see Iraq as a promising and important emerging market, one that's set to grow faster, even now, faster in these years immediately ahead than China.
After Mr. Maliki's comments, Deputy Secretary Nides told VOA American businesses should jump at the chance to serve tens of millions of Iraqi consumers.
At the end of the day, it's about making money, it's about opportunities, and there's plenty of opportunities you had in Iraq.
Iraqi leaders say they are committed to increasing the number of American companies in their nation. As their prime minister said, it will not be generals, but business leaders at the front lines of the new Iraq. Carla Babb, VOA News, Washington.
The war in Iraq lasted nearly 9 years, and as the remaining U.S. troops pull out of the country, Middle East analysts continue to disagree over the success or failure of the mission. VOA correspondent Meredith Buell has details in this report from Washington.
As military convoys roll across the border from Iraq to Kuwait, and the American flag comes down at bases across the country, a recent CBS News poll shows 77% of Americans surveyed approve of the decision to withdraw U.S. troops by the end of the year. Sergeant Fred Fox agrees.
We did as much as we can to help them out, and they're taking the lead on everything. So honestly, it's time for us to go home and let them take care of their own.
It is too early to know how future historians will view the war, but most analysts agree on one accomplishment. Frederick Kagan of the American Enterprise Institute.
We eliminated Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq, and that was a very important success.
But others question whether broad U.S. goals for the conflict have been accomplished. Author Peter Van Buren is an American diplomat. In his recent book, We Meant Well, he is highly critical of the war.
Two presidents told us that our job in Iraq was to create a stable democracy that was going to be an ally to the United States and a bulwark against terrorism in the Middle East. It would be difficult to say that we succeeded on those goals.
By the end of 2006, violence was raging in Iraq, and analysts say the country was on the brink of a sectarian civil war. Then President George W. Bush ordered a surge of additional U.S. troops, which led to a significant reduction in the fighting. Again, Frederick Kagan.
So I think the surge of forces and the change of strategy in 2007 and 2008 was one of the most remarkable accomplishments in the history of counterinsurgency warfare.
Although the U.S. spent more than $60 billion on development projects in Iraq, critics say only a small percentage was actually spent on reconstruction. Author and diplomat Peter Van Buren.
The rest of it was siphoned off by security costs, by waste, fraud, and mismanagement, corruption, various forms of money disappearing, including profit margins, such that very little was spent on the ground.
The decision to pull U.S. troops from Iraq has raised questions about continuing violence there and the threat of Iranian intervention. Adam Mausner of the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
The troop pullout definitely creates a major power vacuum in the region, and the Middle East abhors a vacuum. So the withdrawal of U.S. troops creates major leverage for Iran to influence Iraq.
Iraq and the United States are now entering a new relationship, says U.S. Ambassador James Jeffrey.
We support diplomatically, we support financially, we support through trade, and we support through our general security presence in the region, which tends to keep military situations under control.
Nearly 4,500 U.S. troops died in Iraq in a war that so far has cost more than $800 billion. Now home for the holidays with a hero's welcome, Mike Williams and other soldiers call the U.S. military role a great accomplishment.
And I think in the long run, I think it has saved a lot of soldiers and a lot of civilians in our country from having to make the ultimate sacrifice and having another 9/11.
For U.S. soldiers, the war in Iraq has come to an end. For millions of Iraqis, a new and uncertain future is just beginning. Meredith Buell, VOA News, Washington.
We invite you to join in with your views at our online poll. This week we ask about initiatives concerning the violence in Syria. Just visit our website at voanews.com/ME and enter your vote. That's at voanews.com/ME. We want to hear from you. As Yemen transitions towards democracy, it is organizing a presidential election with only one likely candidate, Vice President Abdrabbuh Mansour Hadi. And that idea is drawing widespread support from opposition parties and Yemen's diplomatic partners. They have been pushing for the replacement of President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who recently agreed to end his 33-year rule after months of protests against him. Analysts say those with interest in Yemen's future have differing motives for backing an uncompetitive democratic process. In the view of Yemen's opposition coalition, known as the Joint Meeting Parties, Hadi is a neutral figure who played no role in Mr. Saleh's violent crackdown on opposition protesters. The 66-year-old former army commander is a Southerner who sided with President Saleh, a Northerner, in a 1994 civil war and helped to defeat a Southern rebellion. Hadi was rewarded with the vice presidency, but the post lacked influence until the president's political demise this year. VOA's Mike Lippin spoke about the candidate with Ibrahim Sharkieh, Deputy Director of the Brookings Doha Center.
Abdrabbuh Mansour Hadi has been actually the ideal candidate for this position for many reasons. One is that he has no involvement in the recent crackdown on protesters, and he is part of Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime, but he has been viewed by the oppositions as a neutral player, a neutral figure at this point, and he particularly benefited from the time when Ali Abdullah Saleh went for medical treatment in Riyadh, where he worked with the oppositions closely and was able actually to earn the trust and the credibility of the opposition, the joint meeting parties.
I'm curious to know why the main opposition coalition, the joint meeting parties, did not put forward or did not want to put forward their own candidate for an election.
I think that's part of the deal that was made between the joint meeting parties and the Saudis, the sponsors of the GCC initiative, and also the support of the U.S., unfortunately. It's very surprising. It will be very unacceptable, in my view, to the youth protesters, is to have only one person running for elections, which is Abdrabbuh Mansour Hadi. And for the oppositions, the parliamentary oppositions, the joint meeting parties, they're explaining this as, that they're compromising and they want to reach a solution for the crisis. That's for the opposition. But for Ali Abdullah Saleh and for the ones who are backing Ali Abdullah Saleh, the Saudis and the Americans, for them it's a continuation of the regime. It's a survival of the regime. They are not interested in regime change in Yemen. They are interested more in a change of Ali Abdullah Saleh, the president. And the reason behind this is that the U.S. does not trust the opposition to be an alternative to Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime, because the U.S., they're motivated by the fight against Al-Qaeda, and so far Saleh's regime proved or presented itself to be the real power and the real ally that can ally with and can serve the interest of the United States in Yemen and fight Al-Qaeda. This is also reflected in the formation of the government, the Yemeni government, the new government, where the ruling party, Ali Abdullah Saleh's party, is taking 50% of the seats in the new government. So if you look at it, the new president, the vice president, Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, is from the regime. The government is 50% by the ruling party. The military institutions and the security institutions are all regime figures. Ali Abdullah Saleh's son and his cousins. So where is the change? There is no change, really. The change that we are seeing is only in the president, but the regime so far, it's still intact and it's still the same as it was under Ali Abdullah Saleh.
Regarding the election in February, we know that Hadi is going to be the consensus candidate, but what are the chances that there will be another candidate, that maybe the opposition, the youthful revolutionaries put forward somebody, or is there anyone else who might actually stand in that election?
I don't think so, because for the traditional opposition, the joint meeting parties opposition, I think they will not come up with a candidate for the position, because that's part of the deal and that's what they signed on. Now, the youth in the Tagheer Square are not being involved in the entire political process of the transition at this point, and that is one of the major weaknesses of the GCC initiative, that it excluded the youth from being involved in the signing. Now, if the youth are involved and they become involved in the formation of the government and in the new arrangements, then we might continue to see only one candidate being presented, which is Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi. But if not, we should expect from the youth to either boycott these elections and work against it outside the structure of the GCC initiative, or if they want to become part of it, they would certainly, in my view, present a no candidate, a competitive candidate for Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, and then it becomes a whole different issue to deal with. So this is going to be a difficult question, for a challenge actually for the youth opposition, whether they want to join the process, the arrangements after the GCC initiative and oppose it from within, then presenting a candidate to compete with Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, or they want to oppose it from the outside, externally, by boycotting and working against the election. And both ways, I think the youth will present a challenge to Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi and to the GCC initiative. So in my view, in order to have a successful transition again, you must involve the youth and you must involve them now.
Ibrahim Sharkieh, Deputy Director of the Brookings Doha Center. Thursday, we hope to bring you the thoughts about the Yemen political picture from London-based Middle East analyst Jenny Hill of Chatham House.
VOA Middle East is building an online network of reporters, bloggers, and citizen journalists called VOA Middle East Voices, and it's only on Facebook. You're invited to send us news tips or submit your own story ideas. Post links to underreported stories on our wall and participate in ambitious citizen journalism campaigns. Simply go to Facebook and search VOA Middle East Voices. Join the conversation.
Egyptians working in the tourism industry say they fear conservatives in the nation's next parliament may have a negative impact on their business. About 1 in 8 Egyptians works in tourism, and a blow to the sector would further damage the struggling Egyptian economy. Noel King reports from Cairo.
Baha Saleh has owned and operated the Cairo Inn in central Cairo for 3 years. Saleh says his 10-room hotel has a few big selling points. It is clean and comfortable, and it is only a short walk to attractions like the Egyptian Museum. But the Cairo Inn is also only a few hundred meters from Tahrir Square, and that has made it less attractive to tourists.
They focus on Tahrir, which is not Egypt. It's very, it amazes me. I mean, in TV, the media, when they show Tahrir, people get scared, but Tahrir is not Egypt. I mean, I'm near Tahrir, like 2 blocks away, and I know the news from the TV.
Egypt's tourism sector has struggled since the massive street protests that shook major cities in January and February and forced the ouster of longtime President Hosni Mubarak. A senior tourism official told Reuters news agency this week that tourism revenue is down by about 30% in 2011 from the previous year. Still, Baha Saleh says he could adapt to problems caused by insecurity. He says his bigger worry is Egypt's next parliament. Egypt is in the midst of 3 rounds of parliamentary elections. 9 of Egypt's governorates vote in each round. In the first round, conservative parties did unexpectedly well. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood commanded around 37% of the vote, but what surprised many was the success of the more conservative Salafi parties, which took about 24%. Salafis want Egypt to adhere strictly to the principles of Islamic law. For tourists, this could mean a ban on alcohol and revealing swimwear on Egypt's beaches. A spokesman with the Salafi An-Noor party recently told Egypt's Dream TV that pharaonic monuments like the Sphinx are idolatrous and should be covered up. Baha Saleh says he's not certain that the Salafis know what's best for Egypt.
It's crazy. I mean, they should get arrested for things like this. I mean, if it's not coming from the head of the parties, they should be investigated and they not let that happen again, because that's really scared people.
Tour guide Rami Aboud is also worried. He says the Salafi party appeared out of nowhere on the political scene, and he wonders if they have the right experience to turn around the struggling economy.
As for the Salafi, I can't stand those people. I can't stand those people. There's just new people just appear suddenly. It's called Salafi, and they have strong point against the tourism, against the method of tourists dealing with the beaches, wearing bikinis or... I think that's not the problem. That's not the big problem. The big problem in our country is to live. Most of the people were living from hand to mouth. So you have to solve the basic problems itself.
Egypt's Salafis say they don't want to hurt the tourism industry. They have put forth several suggestions for sin-free tourism, including gender-segregated beaches and allowing tourists to drink alcohol, but only in their hotel rooms. Magid Negm is the Dean of Faculty of Tourism and Hotel Management at Helwan University in Cairo. He says some of the Salafi suggestions for sin-free tourism are not pragmatic.
We need to adapt people, to orient people, and to aware the people how important this sector to the whole of the country, to the individuals, and to the image of the country.
Egypt's conservative parties do not seem united in their plans for the tourism sector. Some candidates from Salafi parties and the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party have disavowed statements that are viewed as harmful to the tourism industry. Tour operators say they appreciate those statements, but they worry that for foreign tourists, it only adds to the confusion over which direction Egypt is heading. Noel King, VOA News, Cairo.
As Egypt holds the second phase of post-revolution elections, some in the West are alarmed by the front-running status of Islamist parties. But some Islamists are raising alarms of their own, warning of Western-style freedoms such as gay marriage to bring voters to their side. VOA's Elizabeth Arrett has more from the village of Mit Rahina.
Radwan walks beneath the palms on a side street of Mit Rahina, holding the hand of her young son as he practices his recitation of the Quran. The boy and his mother, her face concealed by the full veil of the niqab, reflect the deep faith and tradition that pervades much of Egypt, especially in villages like this just south of Cairo. Conservative values have been a boon to Islamist parties in these parliamentary elections. Religious parties have taken a majority of seats in the first phase, a shock to some who hailed the liberal secular values of the revolutionaries earlier this year. Now, in this phase, Islamists appear poised to do even better, with more rural voters having their say in charting Egypt's future. In a mosque not far from here, the sheikh is careful not to choose sides in the political contest. But he tells the faithful that democracy means respecting everyone's rights, which he says would allow for same-sex marriage or people drinking alcohol on the streets. Framed that way, Radwan says she wants no part of it. She says that's impossible. Egypt will never allow it. Another of Mitrahina's residents, Saad Darwish, agrees, saying choice only goes so far.
The Islamic people, he came democratic, but Islamic democratic, you know, Islamic democratic. Not same now. Not people drink, not people make it problem. Some not good things. You understand to me? When here nobody married the man, they married the man, or the lady married the lady. We don't like this.
The main Islamist groups, the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party, and especially the more conservative Salafi's Noor Party, have played very well into these cultural taboos. Saeed Sadak is a professor of political sociology at the American University in Cairo.
We talk about alcohol, as if Egypt is full of alcohol. Wherever you go, you'll find trees dropping Johnny Walker and others, not fruits. In addition, they talk about bikini. I mean, those people live in squatter settlement poverty, and you don't see bikini anywhere, as if you walk anywhere in Egypt and women are walking in bikini. I mean, it doesn't exist.
While bikinis and booze may seem a false argument, the issues resonate not only with the traditionally conservative, but also, Sadak argues, with a sizable portion of a key voting bloc.
The aim of the speech is to mobilize frustrated young men, unemployed. They talk about alcohol, they talk about bikini women, and so the guys are very much interested.
But there are signs the frustrations of these young men, and others in Egypt, will ultimately win out over what Sadak considers distractions. Economic problems were as much at the heart of Egypt's revolution as politics. Radwan says any group that makes the economy worse is doomed to fail, no matter what their social or human rights policies. Villager Darwish agrees on the economic front. He believes that any turn to a stricter interpretation of Islam would be slow in coming, despite a new constitution on the horizon. He thinks voters will correct any mistakes they might make now when they vote in the next election.
Any people succeed and help the people, anybody help the people come again. If not help the people, not come again.
Darwish may have a deep commitment to his conservative values, but his words indicate an equal faith in the powers of democracy. Elizabeth Arrett, VOA News, Mitrahina, Egypt.
The Egyptian village of Mitrahina is better known to most by its Greek name, Memphis. Founded in 3100 BCE, it was the capital of a unified Egypt for centuries. Little is left of those glory years, except a few stones and several stunning, if shattered, statues of Ramses II, one of the greatest pharaohs Egypt ever knew. All leaders' days are numbered, and the hubris of Ramesses' rule is captured in the poem Ozymandias by the English poet Percy Shelley. In a year when political arrogance has felled the long-reigning leaders of Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, the verse, written in 1817, offers a timely and timeless lesson.
Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away."
That was a poem by Percy Shelley. This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, Burma's civilian government is surprising skeptics. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com. Online news for a changing world.